Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Vikings Season 4, Episode 8, Portage. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Vikings. I don't look at it from a historical perspective. I'm just a guy watching a scripted, narrative-based TV show telling you what I think about it. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Vikings up to Season 4, Episode 8. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So this was a great episode. Despite the fact that the Vikings storyline was mainly just a setup storyline, it was still interesting, and the Paris and Wessex storylines were really on point. We got 3 major deaths, well, maybe not major, but somewhat important deaths. But overall, this episode was just really nicely done and extremely intense. So let me begin with what I feel was the weakest storyline of the episode. Not to say it was completely terrible, just not as interesting as the others, and that is the storyline back in Connecticut with Aslog and Habarb. So the main takeaway here is that her son Siggy really doesn't like Habarb and the fact that he's banging his mom while his father's away, so he leads Aslog to Habarb having sex with 2 women, and they don't even stop when she shows up, and they take no notice of her. And then she freaks out, starts throwing shit around and slaps him. He tries to calm her down and tells her, her that he loves her, but he loves others as well, and warns her not to try to possess him. However, she still insists on being angry with him for sleeping with other women, so he just straight out leaves, to which she is also very unhappy about. Now, honestly, I'm not sure why the hell she was so shocked he was sleeping with other women. I mean, she saw him make out with a whole bunch of different women in the previous episode and didn't seem to mind. Plus, this guy's just like really slutty. I'm shocked that she's shocked that that he would do that. Thus, it's hard for me to gather any sympathy for her. Although I will admit, I did find this scene kind of funny when she was like, "Oh, you slept with every woman in the village." And he's like, "Well, not everyone, just the ones who needed it." And that was funny. Anyway, I do hope they come up with some justification for this whole Hubbard storyline's existence in the future, because right now I just really don't see it. So next, let me get to the Vikings storyline. So at the start of the episode, the Vikings are retreating downriver, and King Finehair and his brother are pissed and are bad-mouthing Ragnar to Lagertha, who doesn't take kindly to them talking shit about him. And then we see Floki talking to his wife, who says they've been defeated, but Floki responds that they haven't been defeated, just Ragnar. And then we see Bjorn tell Ragnar that this weakens him in every way, and I love the look on Ragnar's face that he gives Floki. It's just like, fuck off. But Bjorn, just returns his look with a really stern gaze and doesn't back down. But then Ragnar proclaims that they will make camp at some random cliff face. Everyone's puzzled and grumpy and bitchy. But then Ragnar explains his plan is to hoist the ships over the cliff and then carry them over the mountain and drop them in on the other side of the river. I assume that the plan here is to attack Paris from the other side of the river, where they're not expecting them to come from. So they build all these overly complicated docks and ladders and hoisting machines with ropes everywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead and give this show the benefit of the doubt and assume that these scenes take place over a long period of time to allow them to build such complicated systems. Even so, it does seem a bit extravagant, but I suppose last season we saw Floki build these elaborate siege weapons, but I think that was easier to buy because it actually showed Floki and all these other people building them over time, whereas here they just skipped straight through all that stuff to all the stuff already being there. But don't get me wrong, I'm actually kind of glad that they kind of yada-yada'd over this, and it would have been boring to see this, but I found it a tad bit jarring is all. No big deal. Still, I'm very curious to see how historically accurate these boat hoisting scenes are. I hope someone like History Buffs does a video about it, because I'd be really interesting to see what they have to say about it. Now, I'm not saying that it's definitely not accurate. As far as I know, it could be extremely accurate. I'm just curious to find out. Also, I'm a bit curious about Floki's reaction when Ragnar asked if he could lift the ships over the mountain. His response is, well, I can do it, and I can do it for you, because everything I do for you. So what I'm wondering is Floki being sincere? Because I know Ragnar did just save his life in the previous episode, but just earlier Floki was bad-mouthing Ragnar. But ultimately, I think he is being sincere, and much like Fine Hair, who praises the plan as brilliantly insane and says he feels stupid to have ever done him, I think Floki was won over by the brilliance of Ragnar's plan and is truly devoted to him again, but we'll see. So, we play out this conflict between King Horik's son and Bjorn again, when Bjorn's wife has this daydream of Bjorn getting killed by him, which was a fake out that I found a tad bit hokey, but it builds to her insisting that she would go with him on their journey, and as she says that she wants to protect him, and I do feel is specifically against King Horik's son. You know, I'm not a huge fan of this storyline, but I don't entirely hate it either. It's okay. But let's get to Yudu and Ragnar's big encounter with him, which drives home how big of a drug addict this guy has really become. So as Ragnar prepares to leave, he asks Yudu for the rest of the drugs, and she claims there's none left, but she's lied about this before, so he's not buying it. But she refuses him and warns him that she knows his secret of the colony of Wessex was slaughtered, and that he killed to protect his secret. And frankly, that was a huge mistake of her to do. Seriously, what the hell was she thinking? She knows that Ragnar has already killed one of his own men in order to keep the secret, and she threatens to expose it, especially when he's in this drugged out state. Come on. So, of course, he kills her right then and there, but my question is, doesn't Ragnar know that his secret of England will come out eventually? I mean, I'm sure somewhere down the line, someone like Lagatha or someone might go, hey, I wonder whatever happened to all those people we left behind in England. Maybe we should check in on him. I mean, he's not going to be able to keep it secret forever, but whatever. Personally, I think it would be really interesting if you had told someone like maybe King Horik's son or King Finehair or maybe even Floki about it before she died, and this comes back to bite him in the ass. But we'll see. I kind of doubt it. Kind of seems like if any of those people knew, they would have confronted him about it right away. But who knows? So then, then he grabs something from her, which you must assume is the rest of the drugs, so she was indeed lying. This does mean that Ragnar isn't out of drugs yet, but it is a finite supply, and he just killed his supplier. Maybe this will lead to a storyline with him roaming the streets of Paris looking for more drugs, but we'll see. Anyway, Ragnar's son, they walk in on him as he's killing her, and he just ignores it, tries to play it off like nothing wrong. It's like, hey, how's it going? And he farewells his sons and nonchalantly, just shoves the body away in the water. So my first reaction of this scene was to wonder what the whole purpose of having you do in the first place in the show, as it seems like they killed her off rather quickly and she was kind of pointless. However, after giving it some thought, I come up with several reasons, all of them having to do with the effect on Ragnar's character. The obvious one is that, well, he's become a drug addict now, and he's quite zoned out all the time. But I think the big one is that it makes you doubt whether or not Ragnar still has it. As in the past, he was portrayed as this military genius who would come up with these huge ideas that no one would ever expect to defeat his enemies and win the day. And we were led to believe after the last episode when he was defeated that he doesn't have it anymore. But with this new ambitious plan to haul the boats over the mountains, we're led to believe that he does still have it. But this scene where he killed Yudu makes us question that. Does he? Does he really? Or is he just a zoned out junkie now? Only time will tell. So I do want to talk real quick about how Ragnar's plan to haul the boats over the mountain and drop them in on the other side of the river is actually really ingenious, and I think it's interesting to see whether or not this works out for them, because I think it most likely will, because I think they'll be that Paris will be completely caught off guard because they think, that the Vikings retreated and that they definitely won't be expecting them to come from the other side, not even Rollo. So let's go to the Paris storyline next, as I thought this was really awesome as well. So we begin with the scene where Odo goes to the Emperor and warns him about Rollo, and how Rollo is likely to betray them again, and suggests that they just kill him to prevent it. Roland agrees, and the Emperor seems to be considering it. So if I hadn't seen any episodes before this and just watched this episode in a vacuum, I would be thinking the Emperor was actually going to go with Odo's plan. But knowing that the Emperor already knows that Odo plans to kill him and try to steal, his crown, makes me question that. But I still wasn't entirely certain. So I was still questioning this going into the next scene, where the Emperor has dinner with his daughter and Rollo, and where she announces that she's pregnant with Rollo's child, which I think complicates matters, and Rollo reasserts that Ragnar isn't defeated yet while he still lives. So I was actually really wondering at this stage which way the Emperor would go. Just because he knows Odo's intentions aren't sincere doesn't necessarily mean that he values Rollo, but he tells him that he does and that his position is secure, but I'm not sure whether or not to trust him. And of course, the important thing to note that we know Rollo is right and that Ragnar will be on his way again, so the Emperor would actually be wise to keep Rollo around and not act like they don't need him anymore, like Odo suggests that they do. But in the next scene, we see Odo's mistress come to him, and they suggest that they have another S&M session, but this time he should be the one who is chained and whipped. And I knew right then and there that the Emperor decided to move on him, because it was part of Odo's plan to overthrow the Emperor, was to kill Rollo. So I think he realized what was coming and decided to move against Odo first. So Odo volunteers to be chained up, and when his mistress starts hitting him, he's like, harder, do it harder. And then Roland shows up and starts hitting him super hard, and he realizes he's in some real deep shit. And then Roland proceeds to whip him to death, and this was just brutal. They don't stay on this the whole time, but they show the body, how all the skin was ripped off. It was simply a horrific death that surely lasted several hours at least. And just the way it was done, by him thinking he was going to get some sexual pleasure and ends up being brutally tortured and killed, it was just, whew. So then the Emperor holds a royal court where he publicly announces that Odo was killed for treason, and that Rollo will assume his responsibilities and take over defense of the city. So it does seem the Emperor does truly trust Rollo, and I think this is wise, because I think Rollo is truly devoted to him, as he has now, all he ever wanted was the respect and stature rather than always being in Ragnar's shadow. Plus, he has a beautiful wife and child along the way, and that really helps as well. So yes, I think he's purely devoted now. But the real question is, how does Roland feel about this appointment? Is he disappointed because he wanted Odo's job? Or is giving it to Rollo part of the plan? And can he be trusted going forwards? These are interesting things to ponder. So then Roland's sister lingers behind to flirt with the Emperor, who seems keen. I was just thinking with myself, oh, come on, dude. You're seriously going to trust her? She just had her last lover whipped to death, and a grisly death after she used him for information. Come on, guy, be a bit smarter than that. So let me finish off with the Wessex storyline. So this starts off with Egbert returning victorious from his conquest of Mercia, where he killed all the ruling council and announced that W has forfeited all claims and titles and went on a pilgrimage to Rome. And Quinthrith is all happy as she thinks, oh, I'm queen again. But little does she know, So I was a bit surprised that they kind of skipped over the actual battle and jumped straight into him returning, but in retrospect it makes total sense and it was totally unnecessary to see the actual battle, which apparently was rather easy, as, that wasn't really the main point. The main point was that Eckbark is now king of Mercia. So later, Quinthrith goes to visit Eckbark and asks when she can return to her kingdom, and also to let him know that she's pregnant with his son Aethelwulf's child. But Eckbark simply informs her she isn't queen anymore and provides documentation to prove that he is now the king of Mercia and Wessex. And predictably, and quite understandably, she flips the fuck out. Later on, she goes to Judith to at first confess that she's pregnant with her husband's child, but Judith says she forgives her and him because it's the Christian thing to do, but the truth is she doesn't really care because she doesn't love him anyway. But Quinthrith confesses this, confuses this with Judith being magnanimous and asks her to help her escape. And Judith agrees, and I do believe at this stage Judith was being sincere and had every intention of helping her out and was kind of pissed off with Eckbark for what he did. However, next Judith goes to Eckbark and asks him what the fuck's up with this bullshit, and he tells her that they would never accept Quinthrith as queen, and he had to become king because it was the only way to stabilize the region. And there is the element of truth to that, as Quinthrith is crazy and they tried to overthrow her once already. But Judith calls him out and says that this is what he wanted anyway, and she's right and he doesn't deny it. Instead, he decides to tell the full truth and then confesses his love in such a way that wins her over. So it was at this stage I think Judith decided to betray Quinthrith because Eckbark is just a smooth operator that won her over. So when Quinthrith tries to sneak out of the castle, the guards stop her and arrest her, and I think it's obvious they knew to be on the lookout because Judith told Eckbark about it. So they bring her to Eckbark, who tells her she can't leave because, her son is Ragnar's son and they may need him close by should he ever return. And after all, she's carrying his grandson, so, she needs to stay close by. So she's not happy with this, of course, and at night tries to sneak into Eckbark's room, and when a guard tries to stop her, she kills him, and then she sneaks up to him while he's sleeping and shoves a knife under his throat and starts acting all crazy like she does. And Eckbark tries to talk his way out of it, but she's not having it, and I'm convinced had Judith not shown up, that she would have definitely killed him. And in fact, I do believe she was just about to, which is why Judith chose to strike first and kill her. I think it was implied Judith was sleeping with him at the time, but just so happened to be out of the room when Quinthrith snuck in, and that's something Quinthrith hadn't considered. So Judith kills Quinthrith to save Eckbark, but as she does, she tells her she's killed twice over, referring to her unborn child, and then Judith turns to Eckbark and tells him, "Look what you made me do." Now, I do think that line was a tad bit on the nose, but I kind of think it works. I see what they were going for, and I think overall they succeeded with flying colors, as this scene was super intense and totally shocking. So my question is, what's going to happen with Aethelwulf when he comes home and finds out the woman he loves is dead and his father stole her kingdom? Now, I'm sure Eckbark and Judith will conveniently leave out the parts about her being pregnant with his child and the fact that they were the ones to kill her, but I think he knows enough to be pissed about it. None the least that Judith and Eckbark are full-on lovers now, but I'm sure this will be interesting to see. So my rating for Portage out of 10 is a 9, excellent. As I said, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the Aslog storyline and the Vikings storyline was mostly just set up, this was still an amazing episode. The Paris storyline was spot on, as was the Wessex storyline, and the Viking storyline was still good. It was the good kind of setup that, expands characters with great interactions and lots of surprises. This was a great episode all along, but not quite one of the best, but still a lot of spot-on political intrigue pulled off really well. So that's it for my review of Portage. Be sure to check back here every week as I review the remaining episodes of Vikings Season 4. And be sure to check out my channel for other videos on mini shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Better Call Saul, Fear the Walking Dead, and more. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.